Picture this. You're standing in front of your entire family, friends, and colleagues at your retirement party. Your own son looks at you with this smug grin and announces loud enough for everyone to hear, "Well, Dad, you're officially broke now." Everyone starts chuckling. Your heart pounds. Your face burns with embarrassment. But instead of breaking down, you smile. You calmly pull out your phone and ask, "Want to check my bank balance?" The moment he sees that screen, $8.2 million staring back at him, he can't speak. His face goes white as a sheet. And that's just the beginning of how I completely destroyed my ungrateful son's entire world. But before I tell you exactly how this nuclear revenge unfolded and the absolutely devastating consequences that followed, smash that subscribe button right now because this story is about to get absolutely insane. And trust me, if you think family drama can't get any worse than this, you have no idea what's coming. Hit that notification bell too, because the ending of this story, it's going to leave you speechless. Now let's get into it. My name is Benjamin Torres, and I spent 37 years of my life building what I thought was the perfect American dream. I started as a maintenance worker at Henderson Manufacturing back in 1987, making $8.50 an hour, living in a cramped studio apartment that smelled like cigarettes and broken promises. But I had something most people don't, an unshakable belief that hard work, sacrifice, and playing the long game would eventually pay off. Little did I know that the biggest betrayal of my life would come from the person I loved most in this world. You see, while everyone around me was buying new cars, going on fancy vacations, and living paycheck to paycheck, I was doing something completely different. Something that would make me wealthy beyond their wildest dreams, but also set the stage for the most brutal family destruction you've ever heard. Let me take you back to where this all started. When my wife Maria and I had our son Derek in 1989, I made a promise to myself that he would never know the struggle I knew growing up. My father abandoned us when I was 12, leaving my mother to work 3 jobs just to keep our lights on. I swore on everything I held sacred that I would be different. I would provide. I would sacrifice everything for my family's future. But here's what nobody tells you about sacrifice. Sometimes the people you're sacrificing for start to take it for granted. Sometimes they start to see your struggles as weakness. Sometimes they start to despise you for it. Derek was 5 years old when I started my first side business, a small lawn care operation. Every weekend, while other dads were coaching Little League or taking their kids to Disneyland, I was pushing a mower under the scorching Arizona sun, my hands bleeding from gripping the handles for 12 hours straight. Maria would make me sandwiches wrapped in aluminum foil, and I'd eat them sitting on the curb between jobs, watching Derek play in other people's perfectly manicured yards. "Daddy, why can't we have a pool like Tommy's family?" he asked me once, his little face pressed against the window of Mrs. Henderson's house where I was trimming hedges. I knelt down, wiped the sweat from my forehead with the back of my dirty work glove, and said, "Son, Daddy is building something special for us, something that's going to last forever. But it takes time, and it takes sacrifice." He just nodded and ran off to play. I had no idea that moment would haunt me 29 years later. The lawn care business exploded. Within 3 years, I had 12 employees and was servicing over 200 properties across Phoenix. But instead of lifestyle inflation, I did something most people thought was crazy. I lived like I was still making $8.50 an hour. We stayed in our modest 3-bedroom house. I drove a 15-year-old Ford pickup truck. Maria shopped at thrift stores and clipped coupons like our survival depended on it. Every single extra dollar went into 2 places: Derek's college fund and investment accounts that I studied obsessively every night after everyone went to bed. Warren Buffett became my Bible. Benjamin Graham was my prophet. While Derek's friends' parents were buying boats and RVs, I was reading annual reports and calculating compound interest like it was a religion. By 1995, the lawn care business was generating enough passive income that I could focus entirely on my day job at Henderson Manufacturing, where I'd been promoted to supervisor. But here's the thing nobody knew. I wasn't just supervising. I was learning every single aspect of that business inside and out. I was studying supply chains, understanding profit margins, and building relationships with suppliers and customers. Derek was now 6, and he started asking different questions. Dad, why don't we ever go anywhere fun? Why don't we have nice things like everyone else? I remember sitting on his bed that night looking into those innocent brown eyes that looked just like mine, and trying to explain something that was probably too complex for a 6-year-old. Derek, there are 2 types of people in this world. People who work for money and people who make money work for them. Right now, Daddy is working for money so that someday money can work for us. Do you understand? He shook his head no. It means Daddy is planting seeds now so that when you're older, we'll have a whole forest. But as Derek got older, instead of appreciating the seeds I was planting, he started resenting them. He started resenting me. High school was when everything changed. Derek was now hanging out with kids whose parents were doctors, lawyers, real estate agents who were riding the late 90s boom. These kids had everything. The latest PlayStation, designer clothes, cars for their 16th birthdays. Derek came home one day, slammed his backpack down and said something that cut me deeper than any physical wound ever could. Dad, I'm embarrassed to tell people what you do for a living. The room went silent. Maria stopped stirring the spaghetti sauce. The clock on the wall seemed to tick louder. What do you mean, son? I mean, Todd's dad is a surgeon. Mike's dad owns 3 restaurants. Jessica's dad is some big shot at Intel. And my dad cuts grass and fixes machines. The disrespect in his voice was like a knife twisting in my chest. But what he didn't know, what nobody knew, was that by 1999, my investment portfolio had already crossed the $500,000 mark. The lawn care business was generating over $200,000 annually in passive income, and I had started acquiring small rental properties that were building equity every single month. But I kept living like we were broke, and Derek hated me for it. Then something happened that changed everything. Henderson Manufacturing, the company I'd been working for since 1987, ran into serious financial trouble in 2001. The dot-com crash had destroyed their biggest client, and they were facing bankruptcy. Derek was 12 now, old enough to understand when I sat the family down for a serious conversation. Kids, Daddy's company is in trouble. We might need to tighten our belts even more for a while. Derek rolled his eyes. Great. Like we weren't poor enough already. But what Derek didn't know was that I had been preparing for this moment for years. While my coworkers were panicking about losing their jobs, I had been quietly building relationships with our suppliers, learning our customer base, and understanding every aspect of the business. 3 weeks later, I walked into Mr. Henderson's office with a proposition that would change our lives forever. Sir, I'd like to buy the company. He nearly choked on his coffee. Ben, you're a supervisor. You make $50,000 a year. How could you possibly? I placed a folder on his desk containing bank statements, investment account summaries, and a business plan I'd been working on for 6 months. I have the capital and I have the plan to turn this around. The leather chair creaked as Mr. Henderson leaned back, his weathered hands trembling slightly as he opened the folder. I could smell his stale coffee and the Old Spice aftershave he'd worn every day for the 15 years I'd known him. The fluorescent light hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the financial documents that represented everything I'd built in secret. His eyes widened as he scanned the numbers. $1.2 million in liquid assets. Property holdings worth another $800,000. A business plan that detailed exactly how to restructure operations, reduce overhead by 30%, and expand into commercial maintenance contracts. Jesus Christ, Ben, where did all this come from? I had practiced this moment in my head 1,000 times. While everyone else was spending, I was saving. While everyone else was consuming, I was investing. While everyone else was living for today, I was building for tomorrow. The negotiation took 3 months. During those 3 months, Derek watched me leave for work every morning and come home every night to our same modest house, eating the same simple meals, wearing the same old clothes. He had no idea that I was negotiating the purchase of a $5 million manufacturing company. On December 15, 2001, I became the owner of what was now called Torres Manufacturing. I was 37 years old, and I owned a business that would generate over $3 million in annual revenue. Derek found out the same way everyone else did, when the local newspaper ran a story about the maintenance worker turned manufacturing mogul. I'll never forget the look on Derek's face when he came home from school that day. He was holding the newspaper, his hands shaking. "Dad, is this real?" Maria was crying in the kitchen. Happy tears, proud tears, tears of relief that our years of sacrifice had finally paid off. "Yes, son, it's real." For a moment, just a moment, I thought everything would change. I thought Derek would finally understand why we had lived the way we did. I thought he would be proud of his father. But instead, his face darkened with something I didn't recognize at the time. Something that would fester for the next 23 years. "Why didn't you tell me?" His voice was barely a whisper. I wanted it to be a surprise. I wanted to make sure it was really happening before. "No." His voice was getting louder now. "Why didn't you tell me we weren't actually poor? Why did you let me be embarrassed? Why did you let me lie to my friends about who we were?" And there it was. The seed of resentment that would eventually grow into the betrayal that destroyed our relationship forever. The next 15 years were supposed to be our golden years. Torres Manufacturing thrived under my leadership. We expanded into 3 states, acquired 2 competitors, and developed proprietary technology that revolutionized industrial maintenance systems. Derek went to college, Princeton, full ride paid in cash. No student loans, no financial stress, just pure opportunity. He graduated with a degree in business administration and immediately joined the family company as a junior executive. This is where I made my biggest mistake. I thought bringing Derek into the business would finally bridge the gap between us. I thought working side by side would help him understand the sacrifices I'd made and the empire I'd built for his future. Instead, it gave him a front row seat to my wealth, and somehow, that made him hate me even more. By 2018, Torres Manufacturing was worth over $12 million. My personal investment portfolio had grown to nearly $6 million. I owned rental properties across 4 states, generating passive income that most people couldn't earn working full-time. But Derek had become someone I didn't recognize. He drove a BMW that cost more than most people's houses. He lived in a penthouse apartment in downtown Phoenix. He wore watches that cost more than I had made in entire years when he was growing up, and he treated me like I was an embarrassment. "Dad, you really need to update your wardrobe," he said during a company meeting in front of our entire executive team. "You're worth millions of dollars, but you dress like you're still cutting grass." The room fell silent. I was wearing the same type of simple button-down shirt and khakis I'd worn for decades. They were clean, pressed, and professional, but they weren't designer. "These clothes serve their purpose, Derek. Their purpose is to make you look poor, which reflects poorly on the company, which reflects poorly on me." I should have corrected him right there. I should have reminded him that every opportunity he'd ever had was paid for by a man who wore simple clothes and drove old trucks. Instead, I let it slide. That was mistake number 2. Over the next few years, a pattern emerged that I was too blind to see clearly. Derek wasn't just embarrassed by my lifestyle choices. He was actively working to undermine my authority within my own company. He started holding meetings without me. He made decisions about company direction without consulting me. He began telling employees that I was out of touch and stuck in the past. Most devastating of all, he started spreading a narrative that I was a workaholic who had neglected his family in pursuit of money. My dad was never around when I was growing up. I overheard him telling a group of young executives at the company Christmas party in 2019. He was always working, always chasing the next dollar. He never came to my games, never took us on vacation. Money was more important than family. The irony was suffocating. I had sacrificed everything, my time, my comfort, my social life, to build security for his future. And he was rewriting history to paint me as a selfish monster. But here's what Derek didn't know. Every conversation he had in that building was being recorded by our security system. Every email he sent on company servers was backed up to our main drives. Every undermining comment, every dismissive remark, every act of sabotage was being documented. I wasn't just building a case for revenge, I was building a masterpiece. In January 2023, Derek came to me with a proposition that revealed just how little he understood about business, money, or respect. "Dad, I think it's time we talked about succession planning." We were sitting in my office, the same office where I'd first proposed buying Henderson Manufacturing 22 years earlier. The same desk, the same chair, even some of the same financial documents filed away in drawers. "Okay, son, what did you have in mind?" He placed a folder on my desk, mirroring the moment I'd done the same thing with Mr. Henderson all those years ago. But instead of bank statements and business plans, Derek's folder contained something that made my blood run cold. Legal documents, incorporation papers, board resolutions. Derek had been working with lawyers to structure a corporate reorganization that would effectively push me out of operational control of my own company. "I've been thinking about this for months, Dad. You're getting older. You're set in your ways. The company needs fresh leadership if we're going to compete in the modern marketplace." I kept my voice steady, but inside, I was calculating every angle of what he was trying to do. "And what role do you see me having in this reorganization?" "Chairman Emeritus, you'd keep your equity stake, of course, but day-to-day operations would transition to me as CEO. It's really the natural evolution of—" "No." The word hung in the air like a gunshot. "Dad, you're not understanding." "No, Derek, you're not understanding. This is my company. I built it from nothing. I sacrificed everything to create it. And you think you can walk in here with some legal paperwork and take it away from me?" His face hardened in a way that reminded me of his 12-year-old self finding out about the newspaper article. "Fine. But you should know that I've already discussed this with the board. There's significant support for transitioning leadership." That's when I realized Derek hadn't just been undermining me with employees. He'd been working to turn my own board of directors against me. For the next 6 months, I watched my son systematically try to destroy everything I'd built. He scheduled board meetings when I was traveling. He presented strategic plans that directly contradicted my vision for the company. He even started interviewing external candidates for executive positions without my approval. But the worst part wasn't the business betrayal. It was watching him poison my relationship with Maria. "Ben, Derek is worried about you," she said one evening over dinner. "He thinks you're becoming paranoid and controlling." "Paranoid? Maria, he's trying to steal my company." "He's not trying to steal anything. He thinks maybe it's time for you to step back and enjoy retirement." "I'm 59 years old. I'm nowhere near ready for retirement." "But think about it, honey. We could travel. We could spend time together. When was the last time we took a real vacation?" And there it was. Derek had somehow convinced his own mother that I was the problem, that my dedication to the business was unhealthy, that stepping aside would be good for everyone. I realized in that moment that I was completely alone. My son wanted my company, my wife wanted my retirement, my board wanted my resignation. Nobody understood that Torres Manufacturing wasn't just a business to me. It was my legacy. It was proof that a maintenance worker from a broken home could build something that would last forever. They all thought I was holding on too tight. They had no idea I was about to let go in a way that would destroy every one of them. By December 2023, the pressure had become unbearable. Derek was openly defying my authority. The board was scheduled to vote on his succession plan in January 2024. Maria was barely speaking to me because I refused to be reasonable. So I made an announcement that shocked everyone. I would be retiring effective January 31st, 2024. Derek was ecstatic. Maria was relieved. The board was supportive. Everyone thought they had finally worn me down. They had no idea what I was planning. The retirement party was Derek's idea. "We should celebrate, Dad. 37 years at the same company. That's incredible. Let's invite everyone. Make it a real celebration of your career." The guest list was everyone who mattered in my professional and personal life. All the employees from Torres Manufacturing, the board of directors, our extended family, neighbors, old friends from the Henderson manufacturing days, and of course, Derek planned to be the master of ceremonies. What nobody knew was that I had spent the 6 months since Derek's corporate takeover attempt preparing for this moment with the same methodical precision I'd used to build my wealth. First, I had quietly liquidated my entire stake in Torres Manufacturing. $12.3 million sold to a private equity firm that Derek knew nothing about. The transaction was structured to close on January 30th, 2024, one day before my retirement became official. Second, I had moved all of my investment accounts to a new financial management firm using a trust structure that made my wealth completely invisible to anyone who didn't have the specific account numbers. Third, I had started a new business, Torres Capital Management, that existed solely to manage my personal investments and real estate holdings. The company was incorporated in Delaware, with no physical presence and no employees except me. By January 30th, 2024, I was worth $8.2 million in liquid assets, plus real estate holdings worth another $4.7 million. And absolutely nobody, not Derek, not Maria, not the board, not even my accountant, knew the full scope of what I had built. They all thought I was retiring with a modest company pension and whatever I'd managed to save over the years. They were about to learn how wrong they were. January 30th, 2024, the Phoenician Resort, Scottsdale. 7 o'clock in the evening. The ballroom was decorated with photos from my 37-year career. Pictures of me as a young maintenance worker, images from the early days of my lawn care business, newspaper clippings from the Henderson Manufacturing acquisition, company milestones from Torres Manufacturing. It was supposed to be a celebration of my success. Instead, it became the stage for the most brutal public humiliation I've ever witnessed. Derek took the microphone first. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here tonight to honor my father, Benjamin Torres, a man who started with nothing and built something incredible through hard work and determination. The applause was warm and genuine. I felt a brief moment of hope that maybe, just maybe, Derek had finally understood what I'd accomplished. But as we celebrate Dad's achievements, I think it's important to also acknowledge the sacrifices that were made along the way. The tone of his voice changed slightly. Maria shifted uncomfortably in her seat next to me. My father was never the type of man to put family first. He was always working, always focused on the next deal, the next opportunity. He missed baseball games, school plays, family dinners. He chose business over being present. My heart started racing. This was supposed to be a retirement celebration, not a public character assassination. And now, as he enters retirement, I think Dad is probably wondering what he's going to do with all the free time he's never allowed himself to have. Derek paused, looking directly at me with that same smug expression I'd seen 1,000 times over the past few years. The truth is, Dad, you've spent so much money on business investments and expansion that you're probably wondering how you're going to afford retirement. Let's be honest, you're basically broke now. The room fell silent. A few people laughed nervously, thinking it was some kind of joke. But Derek wasn't joking. I mean, think about it. You've lived in the same modest house for 25 years. You drive a truck that's older than some of our employees. You've never taken a real vacation. You wear clothes from Walmart. More nervous laughter. Maria's face had gone completely white. So, Dad, I hope you're prepared for the reality that retirement on a supervisor's pension is going to be a lot different than the lifestyle you've been imagining. And then he said the words that sealed his fate forever. Well, Dad, you're officially broke now. The laughter that followed Derek's announcement was like acid in my veins. These people, my friends, my colleagues, my family, were laughing at the idea that I was financially ruined. I stood up slowly, my hands steady despite the rage coursing through my body. Derek, that's quite a speech. The room went quiet again. Everyone was watching me, waiting to see how I would respond to my son's public humiliation. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my phone. You seem pretty confident about my financial situation. But I'm curious, would you like to check my bank balance? Derek's expression faltered for just a moment, but then the smug grin returned. Dad, you don't need to. No, I insist. Since you've made my financial situation such a public topic of conversation, let's clear up any confusion. I opened my banking app, entered my PIN, and handed the phone to Derek. Go ahead, son. Read the balance out loud. Don't worry. Everyone here is family, right? Derek took the phone, glanced at the screen, and his face went completely white. The silence in the room was deafening. You could hear the air conditioning system, the distant sound of kitchen staff cleaning dishes, someone's watch ticking. Derek couldn't speak. He was staring at the screen like it was showing him footage of his own death. What's wrong, Derek? Cat got your tongue? Why don't you share with everyone what you're seeing? His hands were trembling now. I don't... The number on the screen, Derek. Read it out loud. He looked up at me, and for the first time in years, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. $8.2 million. The gasp that went through the room was audible. Maria nearly fell out of her chair. Board members were looking at each other like they'd just witnessed a magic trick, but I wasn't done. Not even close. $8.2 million in my checking account, but Derek, that's just walking around money. Would you like to see my investment portfolio? I opened another app on my phone. $17.3 million in diversified investments, managed through Taurus Capital Management. That's my investment company that I established 6 months ago. Derek was still holding my phone, but now he was looking at me like I was a complete stranger. Would you like to see my real estate holdings, Derek? $4.7 million in rental properties across Arizona, Nevada, Colorado, and Texas. The room was absolutely silent except for someone, I think it was my brother-in-law, whispering Jesus Christ under his breath. So let's do some quick math, shall we? $8.2 million in liquid assets, plus $17.3 million in investments, plus $4.7 million in real estate equals. Derek, you're the Princeton graduate with the business degree. What's that total? Derek couldn't even form words anymore. $30.2 million. That's my net worth as of this morning. But destroying Derek's assumptions about my wealth was just the appetizer. The main course was revealing the full scope of his betrayal and my response to it. I walked over to the podium and took the microphone from my speechless son. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank Derek for his interesting assessment of my financial situation. It's given me the perfect opportunity to share some news that I think you'll all find fascinating. I could see Derek trying to process what was happening, but his brain seemed to have completely shut down. You see, Derek made a speech about how I've never put family first, about how I missed baseball games and school plays because I was always working. And there's some truth to that accusation. Maria was crying now, but I couldn't tell if they were tears of joy, shock, or horror. But what Derek failed to mention is that every single hour I was working, every single sacrifice I made, every single dollar I saved was done with one purpose in mind: building security for my family's future. I gestured toward Derek, who was still standing frozen next to my table. Derek graduated from Princeton with zero student debt because I paid cash for his education. He's been driving luxury cars since he was 25 because I paid for them. He lives in a penthouse apartment because I co-signed the lease and pay half his rent. The room was starting to understand that this wasn't just a financial revelation. It was a complete dismantling of the narrative Derek had been building for years. But despite all of this support, Derek came to me 6 months ago with a proposal to take control of Taurus Manufacturing. He wanted to push me out of the company I built, claiming that I was too old and out of touch to run my own business. I could see board members shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Several of them had been part of Derek's coup attempt. So I decided to give Derek exactly what he wanted. I retired. I stepped aside. I let him have Taurus Manufacturing. Derek's expression changed from shock to confusion. What Derek doesn't know is that I sold my entire stake in Taurus Manufacturing yesterday. $12.3 million to Meridian Private Equity. The transaction closed this morning. Now Derek looked like he was going to vomit. So, congratulations, Derek. You got your wish. Torres Manufacturing is now owned by a private equity firm that has no sentimental attachment to the Torres family name. They're planning to restructure operations, reduce overhead, and maximize profitability. I paused, letting the implications sink in. I spoke with their acquisition team this afternoon. They're not planning to retain the current management structure. Derek finally found his voice. Dad, what are you saying? I'm saying that in your quest to push me out of my own company, you managed to get yourself fired from the company that was supposed to be your inheritance. The color drained from his face completely. But don't worry, son. I'm not heartless. I've decided to give you a chance to learn the value of hard work and humility. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. This is a job application for Torres Landscaping Services, my new lawn care company. Starting position, equipment operator, $8.50 an hour, the same wage I made when you were born. The silence in the room was so complete you could have heard a pin drop on carpet. The position comes with some conditions, though. You'll need to move out of your penthouse apartment. I won't be helping with rent anymore. You'll need to sell your BMW. I won't be making those payments anymore. And you'll need to learn to live within your means just like I taught myself 37 years ago. Derek was shaking now. Dad, please. I didn't mean... Oh, but you did mean it, Derek. Every undermining comment, every act of sabotage, every time you tried to convince people that I was an embarrassment or that I was holding the company back. I turned to address the entire room. You see, ladies and gentlemen, Derek thought he was very clever. But every conversation he had in our offices was recorded by our security system. Every email he sent was backed up to our servers. I have documentation of every single attempt he made to undermine my authority and steal my company. Derek slumped into the nearest chair, his head in his hands. But here's the beautiful irony. In his quest to prove that I was out of touch and holding the company back, Derek managed to get exactly what he wanted. I'm out of the company completely. He's free to implement all of his brilliant modern management strategies. I smiled at the entire room. Of course, he'll be implementing those strategies for Meridian Private Equity, not for the Torres family. And based on their track record, I'd estimate he has about 6 months before they restructure him right out of a job. What happened next was like watching a building collapse in slow motion. Derek looked up at me with tears in his eyes, the first time I'd seen him cry since he was 8 years old. Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I never meant for... You never meant for what, Derek? You never meant to get caught. You never meant for there to be consequences. The guests were starting to whisper among themselves. Some were getting up to leave, clearly uncomfortable with witnessing such a brutal family destruction. But I wasn't finished. Maria, sweetheart, I know this is probably a lot to process. My wife was staring at me like I was a complete stranger, which in many ways I was. 37 years of marriage, and you've been living with a man worth $30 million without knowing it. I kept it secret because I wanted to make sure Derek learned the value of hard work and humility before he inherited anything. I gestured toward our son, who was still slumped in his chair. Instead, he learned entitlement and disrespect. So now he gets to learn about consequences. Maria finally found her voice. Ben, how could you keep this from me? From us? How could I keep it from you? Maria, every day for 37 years, you watched me choose sacrifice over comfort. You watched me reinvest profits instead of buying luxury. You watched me build something incredible, dollar by dollar, decision by decision. I could see the realization dawning on her face. The difference is, you understood that we were building something together. Derek thought we were just poor. Over the next hour, as the retirement party dissolved into chaos, the full scope of Derek's destruction became clear. 3 board members approached me to apologize for supporting Derek's coup attempt. Ben, we had no idea about your situation, said Harold Morrison, who had been my friend for 15 years. Derek made it sound like you were having financial difficulties and weren't thinking clearly about the company's future. Harold, Did you really think that a man who built a company from nothing would suddenly lose his business sense at 59 years old? He looked ashamed. When you put it that way, Derek played on your assumption that my modest lifestyle meant I was struggling financially. He used your compassion against both of us. Two of my longtime employees came up to me with their own confessions. Mr. Torres, Derek told us you were planning to shut down the company rather than pass it on to him, said Jennifer Walsh, our head of operations. He said we needed to support him taking control if we wanted to keep our jobs. The manipulation was even deeper than I had realized. Derek hadn't just been undermining me, he'd been terrorizing my employees with threats about their job security. But the most heartbreaking conversation was with Maria's sister, Carmen. Ben, Derek has been telling the whole family that you were having some kind of mental breakdown. He said you were paranoid about losing the company and that Maria was worried about your health. I looked over at Maria, who was sitting alone at our table staring at her hands. He's been manipulating all of us, hasn't he? Carmen continued, making us think you were the problem when really he was orchestrating a family civil war so he could steal my life's work. As the evening wound down and people began to leave, I found myself alone with Maria and Derek in the empty ballroom. Derek hadn't moved from his chair in over an hour. He was staring at the floor, occasionally shaking his head like he was trying to wake up from a nightmare. Maria finally looked at me directly. Ben, I don't know who you are anymore. Those words hit me harder than anything Derek had said or done. I'm the same man I've always been, Maria. I'm the same man who promised you we'd build a life together. I'm the same man who worked 3 jobs to pay for Derek's Little League registration fees when he was 7 years old. But you lied to me, Ben, for years. You let me clip coupons and shop at thrift stores when we were sitting on millions of dollars. And there was the crushing irony. In my quest to teach Derek the value of money and hard work, I had put Maria through decades of unnecessary financial stress. Maria, if I had told you we were wealthy, would you have let me keep reinvesting? Would you have supported the sacrifices we made? She thought about it for a long moment. I don't know. Maybe not. And if Derek had known we were wealthy when he was growing up, do you think he would have learned to work hard? Do you think he would have appreciated what we built? She looked over at Derek, who was still staring at the floor like a broken man. No, he probably would have turned out even worse. So what was I supposed to do, Maria? Tell you we were rich and watch Derek grow up entitled and lazy? Or keep our wealth secret and raise a son who understood the value of hard work? You were supposed to trust me, she said quietly. You were supposed to trust that I would help you make the right decisions for our family. And that's when I realized the true cost of my revenge. I hadn't just destroyed Derek's attempt to steal my company. I had destroyed the trust that held my marriage together. Derek finally looked up at me, his eyes red and swollen. Dad, I need to tell you something. His voice was barely a whisper. The reason I wanted to take over the company, it wasn't just about the money or the power. I sat down across from him, waiting. I have gambling debts. Serious ones. Maria gasped. I owe $300,000 to some very dangerous people. They gave me until the end of February to pay or... He couldn't finish the sentence. Derek, why didn't you come to me? Because I was ashamed. Because I knew you'd lecture me about responsibility and consequences. Because I thought if I could take control of the company, I could use the business credit to get a loan. And suddenly, everything made sense. Derek's desperation to push me out wasn't just about resentment or entitlement. It was about survival. Who do you owe money to, Derek? Some people who run illegal poker games in Vegas, high-stakes stuff. I got in over my head, and they don't exactly offer payment plans. I felt something I hadn't expected, sympathy for my son. But then I remembered every undermining comment, every act of sabotage, every attempt to turn my wife and employees against me. Derek, you were willing to destroy our family and steal my life's work because you made bad bets in illegal gambling dens. I was desperate, Dad. I didn't know what else to do. You could have told me the truth. You could have asked for help. Would you have given it to me? I thought about that question for a long moment. I would have paid your debts and gotten you into counseling, but I wouldn't have given you control of my company. That's why I couldn't tell you. What happened next surprised everyone in that room, including me. I pulled out my phone and made a call. Hello, this is Benjamin Torres. I need to speak with your acquisitions team about Torres Manufacturing. Yes, the deal that closed this morning. No, I don't want to reverse the transaction. I want to make an additional offer. Derek and Maria were watching me with confusion. I want to offer Meridian Private Equity $15 million for a 51% stake in Torres Manufacturing, effective immediately. Yes, I understand that would give me controlling interest. Yes, I'm serious. I hung up the phone and looked at Derek. Congratulations, son. You're about to learn what it's really like to work for someone who doesn't love you unconditionally. Derek looked confused. Dad, what just happened? What happened is that Meridian Private Equity just made $8 million in profit on a deal they closed 6 hours ago. They bought Torres Manufacturing from me for $12 million this morning. I just bought controlling interest back from them for $15 million. I don't understand. It means I own 51% of Torres Manufacturing again. Meridian owns 49%. And you, Derek, are about to become an employee of a company that's partially owned by people who care only about profit margins and efficiency. The irony was beautiful. Derek had wanted to push me out so he could run the company his way. Instead, he was going to work for a hybrid structure where my business philosophy would be balanced against the ruthless efficiency of private equity. But here's the interesting part, Derek. I'm not going to be involved in day-to-day operations. I'm going to be a silent partner, which means you'll be working directly for Meridian's management team. Dad. And Derek? I spoke with Meridian about your gambling debts. They're very concerned about having an executive with financial vulnerabilities that could compromise the company. Derek's face went white again. They've agreed to keep you on as an employee, but you'll be starting at the bottom. Equipment operator. Same job I'm offering you at my lawn care company, but without the family discount. But I still wasn't finished. The final piece of my revenge was something I had been planning for months. I reached into my jacket and pulled out another envelope. Derek, this contains documentation of every illegal gambling debt you've accumulated over the past 2 years. His hand started shaking again. I hired a private investigator 6 months ago when I started noticing money disappearing from your company credit cards. Turns out you've been using Torres Manufacturing resources to fund your gambling addiction. Maria looked like she might faint. Embezzlement, Derek, that's a felony. The documentation in this envelope could send you to prison for 5 to 10 years. Dad, please. But I'm not going to the police. Instead, I'm going to make you an offer. I opened the envelope and showed him the contents. Bank records, surveillance photos, recorded phone conversations with bookies. You're going to take the equipment operator job at Torres Manufacturing. You're going to work 40 hours a week at $8.50 an hour. You're going to live in a studio apartment that costs no more than 30% of your income. And you're going to attend Gamblers Anonymous meetings twice a week. Derek was crying again. You're also going to pay back every penny you embezzled from Torres Manufacturing. At your new salary, and living within your means, I calculate it will take you approximately 7 years. And if I refuse? I held up the envelope. Then I turned this evidence over to the Phoenix Police Department, the IRS, and the Arizona State Gaming Commission. You'll lose any chance of working in business ever again, and you'll spend the next decade in prison. Derek looked at Maria, then back at me. Dad, I choose the job. 6 months later, I was sitting in my new office at Torres Capital Management, reviewing quarterly reports on my investment portfolio. My phone rang. The caller ID showed Derek's name. Hello, son. Hi, Dad. I wanted to call and give you an update. His voice sounded different, humbler, more mature. I've been working at Torres Manufacturing for 6 months now. I'm still on the equipment maintenance crew, but my supervisor says I'm doing good work. That's good to hear, Derek. I've been going to GA meetings twice a week like you said. I haven't placed a bet in 6 months. There was a long pause. Dad, I want to apologize, not just for the gambling or the embezzlement, for everything, for being disrespectful, for trying to steal your company, for not appreciating what you sacrificed for our family. I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Pride in my son. Derek, do you understand now why I lived the way I did when you were growing up? Yeah. You were teaching me that money doesn't make you rich. Character makes you rich, and I had no character. You're developing character now, son. That's what matters. Dad, do you think, someday, we could have a relationship again? Like a real father and son relationship? I thought about that question for a long time. Derek, character isn't built overnight. Trust isn't rebuilt quickly. But if you keep working hard, keep going to your meetings, and keep making good choices, yes, I think we can rebuild our relationship. I love you, Dad. I love you too, son. The conversation with Maria was more complicated. She had moved out of our house 3 months after the retirement party, not because she was angry about the money, but because she felt like she didn't know who I was anymore. Ben, I understand why you kept the money secret from Derek. I even understand why you lived modestly to teach him about hard work. But keeping it secret from me, that feels like a betrayal of our partnership. We were having coffee at a little cafe near her new apartment, trying to figure out if our marriage could survive the revelation of my wealth and the destruction of Derek's life. Maria, I want you to know that every decision I made was about protecting our family's future. I know that now. But Ben, protection isn't the same as partnership. You made decisions about our lives without including me. You let me worry about money that we didn't need to worry about. She was right, and I knew it. If you had told me about the investments, about the real estate, about how much we were really worth, I would have supported your decisions, but I would have wanted to be part of making them. I thought I was being strong. I thought I was carrying the burden so you didn't have to. But I married you to share burdens, Ben, not to be protected from them. We sat in silence for a while, both of us trying to figure out if 3 decades of marriage could survive this level of broken trust. Maria, what would it take for us to rebuild our relationship? She looked out the window, watching people walk by on the sidewalk. Honesty, complete transparency about our finances, our plans, our decisions, and time. This isn't going to be fixed with a conversation or a gesture. It's going to take years of proving that you trust me enough to include me. Are you willing to try? I don't know yet, Ben. I need time to figure out who you really are and whether I can trust you again. The story of Derek's public humiliation and my hidden wealth spread through Phoenix's business community like wildfire. Some people saw me as a genius who had played the long game perfectly. Others saw me as a cruel father who had destroyed his son for the sake of proving a point. The truth, as usual, was more complicated than either narrative. Harold Morrison called me a month after the retirement party. Ben, I've been thinking about what happened at your retirement dinner. What about it, Harold? I keep wondering, was all of this really about teaching Derek a lesson, or was it about revenge? It was a question I had been asking myself every day since that night. Harold, what's the difference? Derek tried to steal my life's work. He manipulated employees, board members, even my wife to support his coup. He embezzled money to fund a gambling addiction. At what point does teaching consequences become revenge? I guess what I'm asking is, do you feel good about how it all played out? I thought about Derek working on equipment maintenance crews for $8.50 an hour. I thought about Maria living alone in a 1-bedroom apartment, questioning whether she ever really knew her husband. I thought about myself, sitting in a beautiful office managing more wealth than I could spend in 3 lifetimes but having no family to share it with. No, Harold, I don't feel good about it, but I feel like it was necessary. Was it worth it? Ask me in 5 years when I see what kind of man Derek becomes. What I hadn't anticipated was how Derek's story would affect other people. Jennifer Walsh, our head of operations, came to see me about 3 months after the retirement party. "Mr. Torres, I wanted to thank you." "Thank me for what, Jennifer?" "For showing everyone what real wealth building looks like. I've been working for you for 8 years and I never understood how you could drive that old truck and live in that modest house while the company was so successful." She sat down across from my desk. "I always assumed you were just cheap or that maybe the company wasn't as profitable as it seemed. But watching you reveal your real net worth, it completely changed how I think about money." "How so?" "I realized that I've been doing exactly what Derek was doing. Spending everything I make trying to look successful instead of actually building wealth." Jennifer explained that she had started reading the same investment books I had studied decades earlier. She had begun living below her means and investing the difference. "In 3 months, I've saved more money than I had in the previous 3 years. And it's all because you showed me that real wealth is invisible." Over the following months, I heard similar stories from a dozen other employees. Derek's public humiliation had become an unexpected lesson in financial discipline for everyone who witnessed it. 2 years after the retirement party, I was reviewing my quarterly investment reports when I noticed something interesting. Torres Manufacturing, under the hybrid ownership structure with Meridian Private Equity, was performing better than it ever had under my sole ownership. The private equity firm had brought in operational efficiency expertise that had reduced costs by 20% while increasing revenue by 30%. My 51% stake was worth nearly double what I had sold the entire company for 2 years earlier. More importantly, Derek was thriving in the new environment. He had been promoted to shift supervisor after 18 months of excellent performance. His salary had increased to $45,000 annually, still modest, but enough to live comfortably while paying back his embezzlement debt. His direct supervisor had called me the previous week with a progress report. "Mr. Torres, I want you to know that Derek is one of our most reliable employees. He shows up early, works hard, and has become a mentor to our newer hires." "How is he with authority?" "He's respectful and coachable. Whatever you did to humble him, it worked." But the most surprising development was a phone call I received from Derek on a Tuesday evening in March. "Dad, I have some news I want to share with you." "What's that, Derek?" "I've been seeing someone. Her name is Lisa. She's a teacher at an elementary school in Tempe." "That's wonderful, son. She doesn't know about your money or the family business or any of that stuff. She just knows me as Derek, the guy who maintains equipment at a manufacturing plant. And she likes me anyway. She likes me for who I am, not for what I have or what my family has." There was genuine happiness in his voice that I hadn't heard since he was a child. "Dad, I think I understand now what you were trying to teach me about money and character." "What's that?" "That the person you are when you don't have anything is the person you really are." The breakthrough with Maria came 18 months after she moved out. I had been completely transparent about every aspect of our finances, involving her in every investment decision, every real estate purchase, every charitable contribution. I had also started seeing a counselor to understand why I had felt the need to carry so many secrets for so many years. "Ben, I've been thinking about something," she said during one of our weekly coffee meetings. "What's that?" "I think I understand now why you kept the money secret from Derek, and I think I even understand why you felt like you had to keep it secret from me." "Tell me." "You grew up with nothing. Your father abandoned you. Your mother worked herself to death trying to provide for your family. You were terrified that if we knew how much we had, we would become careless with it." She was right. But Ben, that fear made you carry a burden that was too heavy for one person. You tried to be the protector, the provider, and the financial planner all by yourself. I thought that was my job as a husband and father. Your job was to be our partner, not our guardian. Maria reached across the table and took my hand. "I want to come home, Ben. But I want to come home to a partnership, not a benevolent dictatorship." "What would that look like?" "It means we make big decisions together. It means you trust me with the full truth about our situation, even when it's complicated or scary. It means we're a team. I want that too, Maria, more than anything. Then let's try again. 5 years after the retirement party, I was sitting in the same ballroom at the Phoenician resort. But this time it was Derek's wedding reception. He was marrying Lisa, the elementary school teacher he had met during his transformation. She knew the whole story now, about his gambling addiction, his attempt to steal the company, his embezzlement, and his father's elaborate revenge. She loved him anyway. Derek had been promoted to operations manager at Torres Manufacturing. His salary was now $75,000 annually, and he had completely paid back his embezzlement debt 3 months ahead of schedule. More importantly, he had been gambling free for 4 years and 8 months. During his wedding toast, Derek looked directly at me. 5 years ago, I thought my father was the most embarrassing, out-of-touch man in Arizona. I thought he was holding me back from the success I deserved. The wedding guests laughed, knowing the story. I tried to steal his company. I embezzled money to fund a gambling addiction. I manipulated employees and family members to support a corporate coup. I was, without question, the worst son a man could have. His voice cracked slightly. My father could have sent me to prison. He could have disowned me completely. Instead, he gave me the greatest gift any parent can give their child: consequences that led to growth. Derek raised his glass. Dad, thank you for loving me enough to let me fail. Thank you for caring more about my character than my comfort. And thank you for showing me that real wealth isn't what you have. It's who you become while building it. As I sat there watching Derek dance with his new wife, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this moment. The revenge I had planned was supposed to teach Derek about consequences and humility. What I hadn't expected was what it would teach me about the cost of secrets and the importance of trust. Maria was sitting next to me, her hand in mine. We had rebuilt our marriage on a foundation of complete transparency and shared decision-making. It was stronger now than it had ever been. But the most important lesson came from watching Derek's transformation over 5 years. I had spent decades believing that protecting my family from financial stress was the same as providing for them. I thought that if I carried all the burden, made all the sacrifices, and solved all the problems by myself, I was being a good husband and father. Instead, I had robbed them of the opportunity to be partners in building our life together. Derek's attempt to steal my company wasn't just about entitlement and resentment. It was about feeling excluded from the very thing I thought I was building for him. The real tragedy wasn't that Derek tried to steal my life's work. The real tragedy was that I had never invited him to help build it in the first place. Derek and Lisa's first child was born 2 years after their wedding. Benjamin Derek Torres, named after his grandfather. When I held my grandson for the first time, Derek said something that brought tears to my eyes. Dad, I want you to know that when Ben grows up, he's going to know his grandfather as the man who built an empire through hard work and sacrifice. But he's also going to know you as the man who loved his family enough to teach them difficult lessons. And what lesson do you want to teach him, Derek? I want to teach him that wealth is a tool, not a goal. That character matters more than comfort. And that the best thing you can build isn't a business or a fortune. It's a family that can trust each other with the truth. Derek paused, looking down at his newborn son. But most importantly, I want to teach him that real love isn't protecting someone from consequences. Real love is walking with them through the consequences they've earned. As I looked at 3 generations of Torres men in that hospital room, I realized that my elaborate revenge had ultimately become something much more valuable, a foundation for teaching future generations about the relationship between money, character, and love. The $8.2 million on my phone screen that night at the retirement party wasn't my greatest achievement. The $30 million net worth I had built over 4 decades wasn't my legacy. My legacy was sitting right there in my arms. A grandson who would grow up understanding that real wealth is measured not by what you accumulate, but by what you're willing to sacrifice to build character in the people you love. And that lesson was worth every dollar I had ever saved, every sacrifice I had ever made, and every difficult conversation I had ever endured. The revenge was complete. But more importantly, the healing had begun. But there was one more secret I hadn't shared with anyone, not even Maria. Hidden in a safety deposit box in downtown Phoenix was my final surprise, a trust document that would be opened on Benjamin Derek Torres's 18th birthday. The trust contained not just my entire fortune, but detailed letters explaining every financial decision I had made over 5 decades. Investment strategies, business plans, real estate acquisition documents, and most importantly, the story of how his father had learned the difference between earning money and deserving it. But the trust also contained one final condition that would determine whether young Benjamin would inherit the fortune I had built. He would have to spend 1 year working for minimum wage in any job of his choosing, living in a studio apartment, and saving at least 20% of his income. Only after proving that he understood the value of work, sacrifice, and delayed gratification would he gain access to his inheritance. If he failed the test, the money would go to charity, and he would receive only a letter explaining why character development was more important than financial comfort. Derek would find out about the trust on his son's 18th birthday, just like everyone else, because some lessons are too important to be shared too early, and the cycle of building character through consequences would continue for another generation. After all, the best revenge isn't just teaching someone a lesson. The best revenge is teaching them a lesson so well that they spend the rest of their lives teaching it to others.